We are now joined by Keegan Abdoo, a friend of the podcast, his first time on. He is a next-gen stats analyst, and we're transforming the PFF College Football Podcast into the PFF NFL Podcast for a couple of minutes here to talk Super Bowl and, Bucs versus Chiefs. Keegan, you are our favorite New Jerseyan. Out of the three that I know, you're number one. And how's it going? Welcome to the podcast.
It's going good. My family's gonna kill me because I didn't contribute to the snow plowing yet, but I'm sure there's a lot left for me. We've gotten about 12 to 16 inches or something, and it's gonna continue snowing through the night.
So this is where in the podcast I explained to Diante what snow is, because I'm sure he's never seen it before. This is now just a northern podcast. So now I have a running mate to complain about the snow and the cold. Keegan, you told me off air that you may be planning on going skiing. What is your level of ski proficiency?
I think I could get down just about anything. It's just not going to look good. I think it's the best way to describe it.
It's me getting out of bed every morning.
Yeah, there's a local mountain, and I've only really been there like a few times in my life. But if we're getting 12 inches, I figure I might as well try and get out there. So it could be fun as long as it's not crowded, hopefully.
Do you guys have in San Diego sand surfing or something like that? Is that a thing? I see that stuff in the desert areas. People are doing that type of sand surfing. I don't know if they do that in San Diego.
No, I don't. The conditions here really don't work well for that. And I will have you know, we do get snow out here in the mountains. Maybe not in the mainland, but if you want to take a little, 30-minute drive out to Julian or Alpine or Mount Laguna for all of my local people, you'll find snow. That's actually, we've had a lot of that because it's been raining, if you can believe that, in San Diego.
I remember I was watching the X Games when I was the Winter X Games. This is years ago, and I'm sure it goes back here often. But I was Winter X Games I was 12 years old. Winter X Games in California, what? And then you guys have mountains, so there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Mammoth is pretty cool up there, and Big Bear.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now it's the California podcast. All right.
Well, yeah, the California on hiatus while we wait for things to get back to normal a little bit.
All right, so before we get started with the in-depth analysis of the game, I just we're going to start backwards and then start at the end and then work back. So, predictions from both of you: who is going to win? What do you think is the final score? In the sense of, do you think it's going to be high score? A Chiefs win by a blowout and a high scoring game, a low scoring game, a close win, blah blah blah. What do you think, Keegan?
I think it's going to be a high scoring affair. I just think in the end the Chiefs pull away. If you look back at their Week 12 matchup, the final score might have been close, but they had that game in the bag the entire game. The Patriots offense has really clicked since then, but so has the Chiefs, and I feel like the Chiefs just bring it to a different level in the playoffs. I know your colleague Eric has done some interesting stuff with Andy Reid's scheme and how it gets a little bit more diverse in big games. But yeah, if I had to say a final score off the top of my head, maybe we'll go with 38-30.
Cool. D?
So I was actually talking about this with a few other football people, and what I said was I don't know if the game flow is going to be the exact same as this, but I would expect the score to reflect the 2017 Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Eagles. So I do expect there to be a lot of scoring, especially early in the game. Based on what both of these defenses like to do, Keegan mentioned the matchup in Week 12. I mean, after the first half, and while obviously a lot of that was some garbage time offense, the Bucs can move the ball, and they have all the pieces that you need to move the ball. And then obviously we know what the Chiefs are on offense.
So what did you say? Who are you picking?
So I'm going Chiefs, but I do think it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 41-35.
Okay. I think we're all kind of going to end up on the same spot. So let's start off our analysis with when the Chiefs have the ball on offense. And I kind of wanted to pick up what you were saying here, Diante, about what they were playing, what the Bucs were playing on defense to start the game. They scored a lot of points early, the Chiefs, and I think a lot of that was the Bucs did what a lot of teams think they can do, and they say, hey, we're going to disrupt timing. We're going to press. We're going to play man. We're going to press. We're going to disrupt it. Because it's such a timing-based offense, and we'll get in their faces, and the rush will get home before he has a chance. Guess what? Like so many other teams, it did not work. Now, I will say that there's no real blueprint here for to suffocate the Chiefs' offense. But so my question for you guys is, where do you think the Bucs defense and Todd Bowles starts? Does he say, hey, I actually liked this. We actually didn't allow a lot of points. Yeah, they moved the ball. We didn't allow a lot of points. We think that it's okay if we press and we force them over the top, and we live in this world of, say, hey, deep ball passing, high variance. Like, they won't do it again. Or are you saying, hey, this is a continuation of week 12. So where we left off week 12 means we're done with press man to man. We're on to this other stuff. Where do you see the game, I think, starting? What's like the starting point when the Chiefs have the ball on offense?
So for me, I think that when they played the Chiefs in week 12, they were in nickel almost 80% of the time. So early in the game, they did try some of their base stuff. They were running some of like the 5-2 stuff, and they did try man. And it's funny, for what we have tracked at PFF, they blitzed and played man on 3 snaps. And 2 of them were Tyreek Hill touchdowns. So I think that we won't see a whole lot of that. As a defensive coach, I know how finicky guys can be about playing man when you get burnt a couple times. And for what they are on defense, they don't necessarily have the cover guys. Their best, and we've talked about this, Seth. Who do you put your best cover guy on? Is it Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill? And you're facing the same kind of problems. So I think we'll see a lot of nickel. They play a lot of quarters in cover 2 out of nickel. I think we'll see a lot of that again. Try to just play soft. If they're going to take us, with quick game and check downs and things like that, then we'll live with that. But it can't be like what we saw against the Browns early where, you're getting those deep over routes, you're getting those one-on-one shots, or they're playing man again like they did in week 12 and Carlton Davis is getting abused. That's a great way to get 50 put up on you in the Super Bowl. So I think we'll see a lot more zone.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is they at least will have Jamel Dean in this game. They did not have him in Week 12, and he's at least a guy that is a little bit faster. I still don't think he probably can keep up with Tyreek Hill, but Carlton Davis was clearly outmatched in that game. So that could be they could try that, but I agree with Diante here. If you look at we don't have man zone coverage numbers at next gen, but we do have the safety shell that they're showing pre-snap. And if you look at what they used in the first quarter when they just got torched by Tyreek Hill, especially outside the numbers,
it's the most or second most passing yards in one quarter in NFL history.
Yeah, and it was also the most in any cornerback versus wide receiver matchup that we've had in our database for Carlton Davis. So again, Jamel Dean could help, could at least be a little bit of a Band-Aid there. But yeah, in the first quarter, the Bucs went with a bunch of single high, and Tyreek just dominated them outside the numbers. So they switched. They went 61% single high in the first quarter, and then went 72% too high the rest of the game. As Diante alluded to, with those quarters and cover 2 drop zones. And the problem is when you do that, Kelsey's just going to eat you up underneath because you can't play 2-man because Mahomes is going to beat you with his legs. I actually did look this up, and it kind of played out in that game because Kelsey did have a really great rest of the game. They didn't completely contain Hill either, but that's another story. But basically, if you look at their yards per route versus the two high versus single high safeties, it kind of switches. Where single high looks, Hill was at 3.2 yards per route this season, Kelsey at 2.5, and then the other way around, when they see too high, Kelsey's getting 3.3 and Tyreek's 2.0.
You know, we always say this, and I think we're going to say it on every podcast from here on out. What happens when you play single high? You get vertical shots on the outside. What happens when you play too high? People, if you can do it, you work the middle of the field. And guess who can do it better than anyone that's like ever any offense has like ever played this sport? It's the Kansas City Chiefs. So those splits are like crazy in that they illuminate something that I think is it's just hard. Like I've been in defensive meeting rooms a lot. I've game planned a lot defensively. I would just not want to do this because you game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs because of exactly what you just said.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know,
and it's like you said. You even brought up the 2-man thing. Okay, yeah, just double everybody. Well, you know who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
Like there's just there's no good answer for anything that they want to do. The other thing another thing that they didn't have an answer for was something that I noticed that they did in the first game, and I don't think that the Bucs had done this often or at all for the rest of the season, was they showed single high, and then what they would do was kind of back off the two guys covering the slots. Mm-hmm. And it was, I would call this like 3 cloud or 3 double cloud. So the corners are the short zone players, and now, they're playing like, again, this is a very Canadian term, but we call it cut coverage here. It's basically it's 3 cut. That's what I've played in my life in Canada, 3 cut. Mm-hmm. So you're playing that. And the problem is now that the guys who are covering the slots are kind of creeping back pre-snap. First of all, Mahomes, every time they did it, was able to hold on before the ball was snapped. I see what you're doing. And then he's able to go. So if the slots are leaving, the nickel backs, the slot corners are leaving to go deep. Well, what did Mahomes do? He threw it to the slots. He just threw in that area. So it's like there's even these weird coverages that you don't see often. A coverage almost straight from the Iowa State 3 high safety playbook. And it's like, it don't matter, man. It just doesn't matter when you're playing against this team. So let's stay in this realm here. Do either of you expect them to come up with something a little more interesting in terms of, hey, maybe they'll keep running some funky rotations, something, or maybe maybe they will start playing more too high with matching principles, so it ends up being like a 2-man system and living in that world where, hey, look, Mahomes, he's gonna get out of the pocket, but maybe this game he'll overthrow a couple people. The Saints game early in the season, he got out of the pocket a few times, had some overthrows. They still scored a bunch of points and moved the ball in the first half, but at least you lived in this world and said, all right, well, beat us, be Superman. Problem is he's often Superman. So I guess that's my question is, like, as we keep going on in this coverage area, like, do we see them playing maybe just, hey, you know what? We're going to drop off. We're going to play cover 4. We're going to chill. We're going to let you dump it, check down. Or do you think we're going to see some funky stuff, blitzes and this and that, and some interesting stuff to kind of knock them off their rhythm rather than letting them get into rhythm on short passes?
So for me, I would love to say yes, but the issue that they have is that arguably their 2 best players are their inside linebackers.
It's a problem, baby. It's a problem.
So now you're running into a personnel issue because you can't really afford to take David or White off. They do so much for them defensively, especially since they like to let their defensive ends just tear up the field and those guys kind of clean up everything else in the box. Like, the more of the funky or kind of like boutique coverages that you might see in the NFL, you'll see that out of dime personnel. That's just not what Bulls does. That's not what the Bucs have on defense from a personnel perspective. So it's hard to say that they would. I do like when they try that kind of like 3 double cloud or 3 high Tampa 2 style of thing. Like, it's actually very reminiscent of what Spagnuolo does when he's in dime with his 3 safeties as well. So it's interesting, but as you said, this is an offense that has the answers. If they see that, they're not going to say, well, we're going to try to throw the ball on an over route anyways, because that's what we do. Like, they will take that little side adjust, we'll throw the hitch route and take our 7 yards because we're explosive enough to say, 2nd and 2 doesn't really make much of a difference for us, rather than getting 15 yards. We can always go get a 15-yard pass down the line. So, you're kind of stuck in nickel if you're the Buccaneers. And you've just kind of got to hope that it goes away that the last Chiefs Super Bowl did, where maybe you get some turnovers early, tip pass. Yeah. Maybe Jason Pierre-Paul kind of has, one of those games of his life. Shaq Barrett has a game of his life type of thing. And you can kind of eke out, you can eke out a win.
Keegan, do you see I'm sure your fancy next-gen stats say that Bulls is a big-time blitzer. Yes. Do you see that continuing this week?
I don't. And, you mentioned that in our database, since he's been a defensive play caller, he's ranked top 6 in blitz rate every single year. But when he's played the Chiefs, specifically any Andy Reid team, but especially Mahomes, he only blitzed on 17% of Mahomes' dropbacks in the first matchup in week 12, which is his lowest as the Buccaneers defensive coordinator. And there's a reason why people just don't blitz Mahomes. He is just otherworldly compared to everyone else. Yeah. We put out a tweet on it today, but basically he's generated plus 150 EPA, and he's been the least blitzed quarterback since taking over as starter. Teams don't blitz him, but he's still produced 50 more EPA than any other player. It's insane. I mean, the graph I put together was like him all the way up here, and then there's like Breeze and Roethlisberger and like everyone else. And but he's also all the way to the left. So I love describing a visualization during a podcast. It's really good use of my time. But it's going to be tough. And I think this brings me to a question that I had for Diante specifically. We went back and forth a little bit on this earlier when I was just asked you as an aside. But the Chiefs play with really wide offensive line splits. They play with the widest offensive line splits by a substantial amount. I believe it's like 0.03 yards, 0.3 yards wider than any other team. And I know that at least what you guys have told me about this is that lengthens the pass rush lanes. And Diante, when we talked about this earlier, you said like one way to attack that is through blitz. But if you can't blitz Mahomes, what would be a strategy to do that without blitzing? And I guess this is just all to say, like, is Shaq Barrett and Pierre-Paul and Vita Vea, are they the key to keeping the Bucs in this game, or just making a big play that allows the Bucs to not waste an offensive possession that can take advantage of that patchwork offensive line that the Chiefs have?
So the short answer is yes. Those 3 guys are the key for them defensively. As far as answers, and we did talk about this, for them, I think what's going to be important, because there are wider splits that KC plays with when they're in pass pro, is going to be bluffing pressure and then trying to get, one-on-ones where maybe you can get a Pierre-Paul on a guard, running like these like picks and twists and stunts and things like that. You want to get pressure in Mahomes' face. That's your best bet, because he does he is so outside of the context of anything else that we have as far as understanding quarterbacks in terms of dropbacks, in terms of like launch points and release points of the ball, hip angles, shoulder angles. So it's hard to say, when you're looking at like extremely talented pass rushers versus like the typical quarterback, the idea is, hey, we'll crush the pocket, make him step up. He's not going to be comfortable throwing just from, the hips forward without his feet. when you're talking about a guy like Mahomes who was comfortable taking a 14-yard drop back to throw a 24-yard over route, that changes. It just changes the physics and the dimensions of the game. So it's hard to say that there is any like panacea for this. I think that they do wider splits because of the quarterback they have and not so much because of the offense they run. It's because they trust Mahomes, even if he drops back in a way that kind of breaks the protection, that he can still get the ball off. So the hope is, you bluff pressure when you can. You try to get Barrett or Pierre-Paul working like one of those picks or twist stunts, and he ends up on a guard or a back in the best case scenario. And then you're just hoping that, you get in the way. Maybe you nick an elbow as the ball is being released, and you get a pick that way or something like that. But there's no... You're praying for the best possible outcome. Right. I can't sit here and say that, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to win 12 of the 48 dropbacks we're going to see in the game. Like it's not going to work that way.
Right. You want to create a turnover on like one strip sack and just like pray that that's the explosive play that you force one punt and then maybe you pray your offense holds up enough to keep up with them.
On Todd Bowles his like whiteboard in his offense, it just says like hope to hit an elbow at some point. Like that's the same plan. Like just hope someone blows hot air in his direction and the ball like loosens from his fingertips or something like that. No, but I think their wide splits are interesting. It's not like Mike Leach wide splits. It's not like there's huge gaps in between them, but I think you make a point in how it helps them so much because what do you want to do? It all plays together. The two things you were saying, like what do you want to do when you get a team with wide splits? You want to blitz them because there's this holes we can just run through, right? But then, like Keegan said, it's like okay, but he's actually the best player that's ever lived against the blitz. So so the Chiefs are like, all right. Fine. Like, if we have this unbelievable guy against the blitz, we can get away with widening our splits a bit. And, we're already like I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but we're already like a 60-40 pass team anyways in like big games or at least big situations. So, hey, why not? Like, we don't need to tighten the splits because hey, we want a run game to work here. We're going to pull people and we need to mash people together on double teams and stuff. Hey, we run the ball, it'll be fine. Like we'll get it done, but we need to focus our attention, our resources on the pass game. And you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to have these wide splits because he's such a good player against the blitz. And it's funny, you mentioned that the blitz stuff, and it's like the older quarterbacks are the older quarterbacks who are still around.
Right.
Are the guys who are afforded this reverence. Don't blitz him. Don't blitz Brady. Don't blitz Breeze.
Don't blitz Breeze, right? Yeah. Don't blitz Ben.
Yeah, don't blitz Ben because the ball's out before he even almost right when he catches the ball. But yeah, so it's crazy that a guy who's like 20, how old is he, 26 or something like that, gets this aura around him, and it's certainly backed up in the stats as you mentioned. Okay, so one more thing. A point I wanted to make about. So Diante, you brought it up about the Chiefs, the Bucs defense, and having the two inside linebackers being your two best players. Now it works against everybody most of the time, right? Like they were a great defense this year. One of the things, so there's two parts to this. A, the fact that they have a great defense. And those two players being the best parts of their defense means that it's that they also run an odd front. They run a bare front. Right. So that means they want to base out of like a 5-2 look. And whenever you play in a 5-2 look, it means you got one less. Most teams in the NFL are still 4-2, with 4-2-5. So now, because you have 5 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers in their normal spots, you get a lot of space in that second level, like between the linebackers. Rather than the space being between the defensive linemen in a 4-man front, the space is between the linebackers in the second level. And I was looking this up, and where teams run routes to attack them is specifically in that area. And one of the things I noticed was if the Chiefs are in like 11 personnel, so they had 3 fast receivers and Kelsey, so basically 4 receivers on the field, the Bucs are going to play a 4-down look. You just can't play 5-2 against 11 personnel Kansas City Chiefs. You can't really do it against any 11 personnel. You certainly can't do it against the Chiefs. Right. So one of the things I noticed in the Week 12 matchup was whenever the Chiefs went a little bit heavier, so putting in another tight end, putting in another one of these tight end fullback Sherman types, all of a sudden, what are the Bucs going to do? Oh, that's base? Oh, we're going to play base. We're going to play 5-2 also. Now, they know exactly what you're in because you can't do many other things. In a 5-2, I'm not a big fan personally of playing with 2 high safeties because you're creating even more space on the second level. Now you're forced to almost spin it down to 1 high.
Yep.
Now you're playing in that game where exactly what we're talking about. You want to play 1 high? Great. You're getting vertical shots. Now you don't, you know what I mean? And we're the best team in the league at that. And you want to play 2 high? Well, yeah, we went heavy, but one of our heavy players is the best tight end in the league.
Right.
So I think you can manipulate. I was curious about this, if they're going to do that. They honestly could come out and play like 2 heavy snaps and like it would be nothing. But they did a few times. They did it like 5 times, and the EPA was very high on those snaps in the Week 12 game. And I wonder if they look at it and say, hey, we can get the Bucs to do what they think they want to do, but it's actually what we want them to do. And that's play without speed on defense. With 5 defensive linemen, bring in an extra interior player and see if they can get the matchups that they like that way. Force them into cover 3. I saw them, they were motioning Kelsey out into the slot, and I don't even know his name, number 90 for the Bucs, like a defensive end for the Bucs, was having to split out on Travis Kelce.
Is it 90 JPP?
It was a white guy, so maybe it was like 98 or something like that. Okay. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah.
But the Giants fan just jumped out of me.
So I just wonder if they. So all of a sudden, your Kelsey's in the slot. There's a guy who cannot cover, playing on top of Kelsey, or in like kind of like an apex role. So that was it. Only happened 5 snaps, but I do wonder. If that's something they look to get into. I don't know if you guys have looked up anything about the Chiefs and heavy, if they're good, or the Bucs against heavy like that. But it's something that I saw when I watched the film, and I thought that was interesting from the Week 12 matchup.
So I actually, now that you mention it, I want to go back and look, and maybe I can add this to the thread once it gets posted on social media. Like, I don't have the data in front of me, but I do remember them playing a lot more 12 and 21 early in the season. And it's because of the reason that you mentioned. Because when they're in 11, it's really 10 personnel for them.
Yeah. Right.
It's just that their tight end is the 4th receiver, Right. So when they're in 21 and 12, it's really 20 and 11 for most teams in terms of how you have to look at it. And I mean, Kelsey's a capable blocker. He's not the world's best blocker, but he does just enough of it. Yeah. So where if you're playing base, you do have to make a decision with, if we play 2 high, that means our linebacker has to cover this guy. If it's single high, that means we've got nobody who can help on Tyreek,
Yeah.
And their level of speed, again, like we're talking about degrees of speed and talent. It's versus anybody else, you could probably say, hey, tight end kills us, tight end kills us, We'll live. Maybe he has his best day. Travis Kelce's best day might be 175 receiving yards.
And 15 receptions.
Right, like
on hitches in the versus 2 high zone, just right over the middle.
A whole bunch of yak yardage was that. So it's hard to, again, there's no panacea for this offense. I would be interested to see if Kansas City does do that, especially early in the game, to try to bait them into blitzing a little bit more, just to see, if Bowles has the discipline to say, no, we're going to play soft, coverage throughout the game, no matter what, or if you give him the candy, will he take it and decide to turn up the pressure and maybe spin down the single high a little bit more? And that might be what they do to like take some deep shots, because there is going to be pressure. Like for as much credit as we give Mahomes, and rightfully so, for what he does versus the blitz and how well he usually plays against pressure, there is going to be a lot of it, I think.
The offensive line,
the Chiefs don't have the best offensive line, and they're already they're banged up.
And then missing both of their tackles.
Yeah, right.
Remmers is moving. Yeah.
So the opportunity is there for the Bucs in terms of pass rush. I just don't think you can blitz them. No matter what personnel you're in, I just don't think you can blitz them. It's too risky a proposition, and now you're asking for as good as Levante David is and Devin White are at being linebackers. Them covering Travis Kelce is not a winning business model. It's just not.
No, especially
that's
White.
not the answer.
Especially White.
Yeah, it's just not the answer.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that 10 personnel 11 personnel becomes 10 personnel, 12 personnel becomes 11, etc. Like we were just writing an article, me and my colleague that's going out, and one of like the narrative busters is that Travis Kelce is like the best tight end in the league. Like no, he's like a top 5 wide receiver in the league almost, because he's pretty much like the X in that offense. I mean,
that's it.
There's that one stat that I love. He lines wide more than any other tight end in the league by far. I think it's like over 100 something snaps more than anyone else. But like when they isolate him in trip sets, and they get that special trips formation where they have, Hill as the 3, it's just so much fun. You get him on a crosser. That's how he beat Carlton Davis on the crosser in week 12. But it's just such a deadly formation. I actually have the numbers on it. They've run it 107 times this year and averaged, I think, 9.8 yards per pass out of it, and like 7.3 in all others. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
This is, and they talked about this. Romo talked about this on against in the Bills broadcast.
Yeah, I think that was our segment. Segment. Yeah.
Brought to you the Romo talk brought to you by Next Gen Stats.
Yeah, we're all powered by AWS. we're all powered by AWS in this podcast now. So.
Yeah, but it's like the funny thing is that play specifically. You talk about it when. Kelce is lined up as the ISO, and Tyreek Hill runs the touchdown against the Bucs in Week 12, which is like what I was saying earlier, which is like, all right, we're done with this press man-to-man stuff. It's done.
Because that was the end of the first quarter. That's when they went away from it. Yeah,
that was exactly that formation, that play, running Tyreek Hill from the wide side of the field to the short side over. And if you don't have the only way to stop it, and they have plans for this if you do, but the only way to stop it is really to keep a safety on the half field like that. And whether he's actually a half field safety or he's looking inside at to the strong side of the field and really kind of catching Tyreek on that route, whatever it is, it's kind of the only way you can do it. And then like we've been talking about, there's so much space for Kelce when you do that. Okay, let's flip it over to the Bucs offense when they're on the field versus the Chiefs defense. And my only thing with the Bucs offense is I just can't get over how much this offense is not the New England Patriots offense. Like Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So people who were saying, it's a scheme quarterback, blah, blah, blah. He only works in the Patriot system, blah, blah, blah. We're always wrong. Like that was never going to ever be right. But with that said, you play 20 years in the same system with the same terminology, with the same, with the same patterns that are being presented in front of you, on passing plays. Your brain starts firing in the same ways. I said this on the radio earlier, and I haven't really figured out a better way to say it, but the way your synapses fire, they do it in a patternistic type of way. I don't know. Okay, my dad was a psychologist. I'm not. So you do that for so long, 20 years, and then, unlike Peyton Manning in Denver, you go and you run someone else's offense. When Peyton Manning went to Denver, what I've heard was Gase wanted to put in his offense in in the winter months when he signed there in the preseason months and stuff like that. And then once they really got into football mode, Manning was like, nah, like it's running my offense. With Brady, now there is some carryover. But honestly, this is Bruce Arians and Brian Leffer's offense. And for Brady to, at his elderly age, to be able to deal with, like I said, the different patterns and stuff like that, I think it's unbelievable. I mean, it just shows that he is one of the best of all time. So that, honestly, that's my only thing that I have to say about the Bucs offense. We think they're going to score points, I would imagine. Diante, I know you have some ideas about Spagnuolo's defense. I pronunciated that very hard there, Spagnuolo.
Spagnuolo.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, what are your thoughts on him? Because I know you have some ideas on how he changes from regular season to postseason.
So as far as Spags goes, the way that his playoff defense works is that it's all built off of the threat of cover zero and blitzing the hell out of you. That's what makes everything else go. Like, if you look, number one, from a personnel perspective, we talked about it before we started the pod, he does not have like the star anchor pass rusher type that he's had on other Super Bowl caliber defenses, especially when he was with the Giants. Last year he didn't really have it either, and he's been playing, he's basically been calling the defense this way since he's been in Kansas City. But he's going to play dime. I think that his approach is, if I don't have the pass rushers, then we'll play +1, +2 in coverage. And then what I'll do is I'll just blitz you blind because we've got so many DBs on the field, I can actually cover down. So now Sorensen can be both a cover guy and a blitzer. Tyrann Mathieu can be both a cover guy and a blitzer, and you get all of these different multiples. And if you look at their data, especially as far as like pass rush stuff, they're not killing teams in terms of generating pressure. They're below average really at pressuring the quarterback. What they're great at is getting unblocked pressure. That's one thing that I've looked at it with them. As a matter of fact, I can pull it up now.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
What was it? So
they're always very underwhelming from pressure numbers.
Exactly. And it doesn't, to the mind, it does not follow logic-wise. Because it seems like when they play, they're always getting pressure on quarterbacks. But when you go back and look at the data, it doesn't support it. But really, to me, from what I found is, out of the 8 teams over the last 2 years that have at least 100 playoff pass rush snaps, Kansas City basically doubles the next team in unblocked pressures. Like, they've had like 22, 23. The next closest is the Bills, and they have 12. And then like right below them is the San Francisco from that Super Bowl run. And obviously they had, a ridiculous pass rush. So that just goes to show, from a scheme perspective, that's where they're getting after quarterbacks. It's all stuff that's being drawn up. They're overloading pressures, trying to get free runners, and then trusting the fact that, hey, we're covering guys in man-to-man on the back end, and now you just got to beat good coverage, or you're getting sacked. And we saw that with Josh Allen in the AFC Championship.
Yes, we did.
So that to me is really their defense.
Yeah, and that's actually matches what we got. Spags has the most max blitz happy defense in the league. Sending 6+ pass rushers is what we've defined max blitz to be, and that makes a lot of sense with them getting unblocked rushers. Just by overwhelming force at that point. I actually pulled this up for Steven Ruiz, our mutual friend, earlier when I was on their podcast, but
don't mention that name on this podcast.
Basically, he was like thinking about if Spags is more aggressive in the first half generally than the second half of games, and there seems to be a little bit of truth that mostly on the max blitzes, he max blitzes on about 20% of dropbacks in the first half, compared to 16 in the second half, so still very high rates, but right. It's an increase in rate enough, and it seems to work out where their pressure rate is higher on blitzes in the first half and then higher on 4-man rushes in the second half, which just makes sense. Like, they're playing with a lead all the time. They can afford to dial it back and just have Chris Jones and the corpse of Frank Clark try and get some pressure on their own. But one guy who I want to highlight to look out for in terms of those max blitzes, and probably a lot of these are unblocked, I would have to assume, but L'Jarius Sneed has been used a lot as a pass rusher over the last pretty much since week 14, so since their bye week. Before the bye week, he had only 4 blitzes all season. After the bye week, including the playoffs, he's had 23, and he's gotten pressure 6 times, and 4 of those have been sacks. So he's been a really hot streak. So look for him to come, on some nickel blitzes and stuff like that.
Well, we just finished talking about blitzing good quarterbacks. Is this a recipe for him specifically against Tom Brady, especially at the level that he's playing right now? Do we think we see dime? Do we think we see a lot of dime like we saw against the Bills? And then B, do we see a lot of blitzing throughout the game, whether it's heavy blitzes, let's say, max blitz like you said. Do we see that against Tom Brady?
I think so. Well, yeah, I will say yes to both of your questions. Because the Bucs do have such a deep and talented group of receivers.
Gotta match them up.
You have to play dime. You don't play dime, you're running the risk of. I think Steven was actually the one who maybe pointed this out to me. To mention him again, that like 4 of their receivers have had 1,300 yard seasons at some point in their career. That's crazy. That's like unprecedented level production to have a one receiving room. So you kind of do have to play dime. And again, they don't have the pass rushers to do anything else but pressure. And one thing that we know about Spags is that he's not going to play drop 8 coverage. If he's going to go down, it's going to be with trying to get unblocked pressure and forcing turnovers and incompletions that way. I mean, he's done that at the expense of defending the run. If you look at their run defense numbers, it's like horrid, putrid, especially when they're in dime, So that's the sacrifice they make. And you pointed it out, Keegan. They have like the number one mitigating factor in football, which is the fact that offenses have to score 35 points in order to beat that team.
Yep, exactly. And looking back at the Week 12 matchup, they blitzed Brady on 45% of dropbacks, which is Brady's 4th highest in a game in our database, going back to 2016. And he struggled versus the blitz, especially versus those max blitzes. He went 4 of 8, I believe. I have it here. Yeah, he went 3 of 8 for 24 yards and threw an interception, was pressured on 4 of them. And it was negative 8.1 EPA, which was his worst in a game versus the max blitz over the last 5 seasons. So he definitely struggled. He probably won't struggle that much again, and they'll probably have, protections drawn up for that. But I mean, I expect Spags to keep the pedal to the metal. I mean, it's such a good complement too with Spags' philosophy for this Chiefs offense. It really is the perfect pairing.
The best thing they can drop on the whiteboard in terms of protecting against that stuff is not having Leonard Fournette on the field. I think that would be the best. You know what I've noticed? We're talking about this stuff is like Brady in that game, and then we saw it last week as well. He's just throwing the ball up sometimes. And it reminds me of, as a Saints fan, it reminds me of Breeze in the middle years. So when I say the middle years, I mean the 7 and 9 years. Mm-hmm. Like, all of a sudden, like you felt like he had to press every time. I don't think that's what Brady's thinking, but he's just all of a sudden he's throwing the ball up. You got a pick against the Bucs and a pick against we remember that when Leonard Fournette went the wrong way on the protection, and he threw the pick against Green Bay last week. So yeah, I think that's what we're gonna see. It's interesting because I think we're gonna see that Spags is going to be able to do what he wants to do in blitz, and then like we talked about on the other side, I don't know if Bowles is going to be himself and blitz like he's used to blitzing. Okay, Keegan, this was a pleasure.
This was a awesome time. Thanks for having me on, guys. This was a really great conversation. Went a little bit better than my earlier one, but it's good to see people's faces when you're not trying to interrupt them and stuff. You can find me just at Keegan Abdoo. We got some articles coming out this week, and make sure to tune in to the Super Bowl. Obviously, if you're listening to this, and watch out for our Next Gen Stats segment. I'll have something to do with it, so it'll be fun.
Cool, thank you, Keegan.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Powered by Amazon Web Services.
You don't get to make that joke anymore, Diante. So are you.